What if a Cold War radar base on Long Island had a hidden purpose, not just watching the skies, but conducting experiments that some say bent time itself? What if the radar tower, the real-life inspiration behind Netflix's global hit Stranger Things, wasn't just abandoned concrete, but the scar of an experiment that bent reality itself? On the eastern tip of Long Island, in the quiet town of Montauk, stands a radar tower that should not be there. The AN/FPS-35 dish looms 90 feet into the sky, one of the largest ever built. When it first spun up in 1960, it could track incoming bombers from across the Atlantic. Officially, this was its purpose, part of the SAGE defense network, a Cold War early warning system. But when the base was decommissioned in 1981, the tower was left behind, silent, rusting, its machinery stripped, its concrete cracked by salt air. The site is now called Camp Hero State Park, open to hikers and birdwatchers. The radar dish still dominates the horizon, its corroded steel pointing toward the sky. To casual visitors, it is nothing more than an abandoned military relic. But to others, it is the focal point of one of America's strangest conspiracy theories, the Montauk Project. The claim suggests that beneath the harmless appearance of a state park lies something far darker. A secret underground complex where Cold War scientists tested technologies that bent the very fabric of reality. Testimonies surfaced in the 1980s, most notably from Preston Nichols, who co-authored The Montauk Project, Experiments in Time. Nichols described hidden labs, buried records, and experiments in psychic warfare, teleportation, and time manipulation. He insisted the radar tower itself was modified to channel energy not just into the sky, but into the human mind, and into dimensions beyond our own. Others added their own accounts. Al Bielek tied Montauk directly to the infamous Philadelphia experiment of 1943, claiming he was thrown forward in time from the deck of the USS Eldridge into the hidden labs of Camp Hero. Duncan Cameron described visions produced in something called the Montauk Chair, a device said to amplify psychic power until thought itself could become reality. These accounts sound impossible. And yet, fragments of real history give them a disturbing edge. The CIA's declassified MK-Ultra program proved that mind control and psychological manipulation were genuine Cold War priorities. Documents about Project Rainbow, the codename linked to the Philadelphia experiment, were classified for decades, fueling suspicion that more was hidden. Against this backdrop, the Montauk accounts do not feel like isolated fantasies. They feel like the next chapter. Locals whisper of sealed tunnels, strange lights, and power surges from a grid supposedly shut down in 1981. Visitors report compass needles spinning or feelings of nausea near the radar tower. Restricted area signs still stand in corners of the park, reminders that not everything here is open to the public. And so, the question grows sharper. If this base is truly abandoned, why does the story refuse to fade? In this investigation, we'll explore the roots of the Montauk Project, from the Philadelphia experiment's vanishing warship to the alleged underground labs of Camp Hero. We'll uncover the strange stories of the Montauk Chair, the testimonies of men who claim to walk through time, and the theories that link this quiet Long Island park to alternate realities and the Mandela Effect. And finally, we'll see how the story leapt from rumor into pop culture, becoming the inspiration for one of Netflix's most successful series. Because if even a fraction of Montauk's claims are true, then this abandoned radar tower is not just a relic. It is the scar of a secret experiment that could change everything we think we know about reality itself. The Philadelphia experiment is one of America's most disturbing military mysteries. According to the accounts, the destroyer escort USS Eldridge was outfitted with massive electromagnetic coils under the codename Project Rainbow. The goal was simple: make the ship invisible to radar. But the results, if the witnesses are to be believed, were anything but simple. Eyewitnesses claimed a green haze enveloped the vessel before it disappeared completely. Moments later, it was reported in Norfolk, Virginia, more than 200 miles away, then back in Philadelphia again. Some crew members allegedly emerged disoriented, others driven insane, and a few were said to be fused into the metal bulkheads, trapped between steel and flesh. The U.S. Navy has always denied it. They insist the Eldridge was never even in Philadelphia that day, dismissing the entire story as myth. But believers point to the plausibility of such a cover-up. If an experiment went catastrophically wrong, would the government ever admit it? The account gained traction in the 1950s, when a man named Carl Allen, also known as Carlos Allende, sent letters describing what he saw in Philadelphia Harbor. His testimony was inconsistent, even rambling, yet it kept the story alive. And then, decades later, came a far stranger claim. In the 1980s, Al Bielek went public with a story that stunned even conspiracy circles. He said he was one of the sailors aboard the Eldridge. According to him, when the ship slipped through space and time, he and his brother leapt overboard and landed decades later inside Camp Hero. To Bielek, the Philadelphia experiment was not the end of the story. It was the beginning. Bielek insisted he had lived entire stretches of life outside his original timeline. He described waking up in the year 2137, witnessing a devastated Earth with flooded coastlines and a new global authority. He claimed Montauk was the hub where such journeys were launched. His account, impossible to prove, nevertheless electrified believers, because it provided a direct bridge between two of America's strangest military mysteries. Preston Nichols, whose own book, The Montauk Project, Experiments in Time, would popularize the story, supported Bielek's narrative. Nichols claimed Montauk was not a random site, but the continuation of Project Rainbow, renamed Project Phoenix and expanded on Long Island. He described technical records and recovered memories showing how radar towers at Camp Hero were modified to create fields powerful enough to twist time itself. Skeptics dismiss all of this as fabrication, stitched together from Cold War paranoia and science fiction. And yet, the timing is telling. During the same years these testimonies appeared, real Cold War programs were being exposed. MK-Ultra, once dismissed as rumor, was confirmed by declassified documents, proving the CIA had experimented with drugs, hypnosis, and electromagnetic fields in the pursuit of mind control. Project Blue Book, once secret, revealed the Air Force's obsession with unidentified flying objects. If these once denied programs were real, could Montauk be another hidden chapter? The Philadelphia experiment gave Montauk its framework. It transformed accounts of vanishing ships and broken men into the seed of something even stranger. Without Philadelphia, Montauk might be dismissed as little more than rumors about an abandoned base. With it, the project becomes part of a continuum of Cold War secrecy, forbidden science carried from World War II into the depths of the Cold War. And if Philadelphia was the beginning, Montauk was the escalation. It wasn't just about making a ship disappear. It was about machines that could amplify thought, manipulate reality, and open doorways to other dimensions. The official record is straightforward. Camp Hero was built during World War II as a coastal defense station, disguised as a fishing village to confuse German U-boats. In the 1950s, it became part of the U.S. Air Force network, centered around its enormous ANFPS-35 radar tower. At the time, it was one of the largest and most powerful radars in the world, capable of detecting aircraft hundreds of miles away. Its purpose was clear: protect New York from Soviet bombers. By the late 1960s, the radar was obsolete. The Air Force gradually decommissioned the site, shutting it down completely in 1981. In 1984, most of the property was transformed into Camp Hero State Park. Today, families hike the trails and walk their dogs under the shadow of the radar tower. The official story ends there, but those who live nearby describe something else. Locals speak of sealed bunkers and heavy blast doors welded shut before the park opened. They wonder why certain areas remain fenced and marked restricted area, even decades after decommissioning. Fishermen talk of hearing mechanical hums beneath the ground, long after the radar dish went silent. Hikers describe sudden waves of dizziness or nausea near the tower. Compass needles, they claim, spin unpredictably, refusing to settle. In 2008, a group of urban explorers reported their radios erupting with static as they approached the structure, as if signals were still being broadcast. The most detailed account comes from Preston Nichols. He said that while working at Brookhaven National Laboratory, he stumbled upon references to Project Phoenix at Montauk. According to him, those files unlocked repressed memories of descending elevators into facilities that didn't exist on official maps. He described long corridors lined with labs where experiments in psychic projection and electromagnetic warfare were conducted. Nichols even claimed the radar dish itself was modified to direct focused energy into those underground chambers, linking the tower above to the research below. Historians and skeptics argue there is no proof of such a complex. They maintain that Camp Hero was decommissioned as stated, its radar dismantled, its bunkers sealed for safety. No maps or construction records confirm the existence of vast tunnels. Yet believers insist those omissions are deliberate, that the underground levels were excluded from the state's deed transfer in 1984, remaining under federal control. This is the paradox of Camp Hero. Above ground, it is a quiet park. Below ground, in testimony and rumor, it is something far stranger. A facility where experiments blurred the line between science and nightmare. And if Nichols is to be believed, the story only gets darker, because what he and others described happening inside those hidden laboratories was not routine military research. It was experimentation that allegedly weaponized the human mind, manipulated perception, and opened the door to time itself. According to Preston Nichols, the supplemental of the program was a device known as the Montauk chair. He described it as a massive apparatus built around psychic amplification technology, allegedly reverse-engineered from recovered alien equipment. Seated in the chair, a participant's thoughts could be magnified and projected outward. Nichols said the results escalated over time. In the early stages, subjects reported vivid remote viewing experiences, describing distant places as if physically present. Later, he claimed, the images became tangible. Thoughts formed objects, at first fleeting, then solid enough to be touched. Finally, Nichols alleged, the chair was pushed further. It began to open tunnels through space and time, rifts that allowed equipment and people to pass into other locations, or other eras. Duncan Cameron, another figure tied to the project, added a disturbing layer. While seated in the chair, he claimed his psychic visions spiraled beyond control. In one session, he imagined a creature, a hulking, monstrous figure born from fear and rage. According to Cameron, that vision physically manifested. Witnesses later called it the Beast of Montauk. The creature, he said, rampaged through the underground facility before vanishing. To believers, this was proof that Montauk had crossed a forbidden line. Human thought had become reality. An attempt to weaponize the mind on a much larger scale. Some claims even implicate the radar tower above ground. Its enormous transmitter, once designed to track Soviet bombers, was allegedly modified to broadcast frequencies that could alter perception or influence entire communities. Nichols insisted nearby towns experienced unexplained mood swings and confusion during tests. No independent evidence confirms this, but the allegation remains one of Montauk's most unsettling. Time manipulation remains the most controversial claim of all. Nichols, Bielek, and Cameron each described time tunnels opening beneath Camp Hero, swallowing people and machinery before sealing shut. Skeptics counter that these stories are recycled from pulp novels of the 1950s and embellished over time. They argue the Montauk chair was an invention of Nichols' imagination, borrowing from real psychological experiments and dressing them in science fiction trappings. But even skeptics admit that the persistence of these accounts is striking. Year after year, new voices repeat them, expanding the mythology around Camp Hero. If even fragments of these accounts are true, then Montauk was far more than a Cold War radar base. It was a laboratory where thought itself became a weapon, where experiments reached into dimensions beyond our own, and where the boundary between reality and imagination was deliberately blurred. And if Montauk truly tampered with time, then the consequences may not be locked in the past at all. They may still be rippling outward, hidden in the reality glitches and fractured memories people report today. Among the most persistent claims tied to the Montauk Project is the idea that its experiments damaged reality itself. Believers suggest that by opening time tunnels and manipulating thought, researchers at Camp Hero destabilized the timeline. The result, they say, is the strange phenomenon we now call the Mandela Effect. The Mandela Effect describes the eerie sensation of shared false memories. Thousands of people recall Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, even though he lived until 2013. Others insist the children's book series is spelled Berenstain Bears, not Berenstain. Some claim the location of countries on the map has shifted, or that logos and brand names have changed inexplicably. Psychologists explain this as a trick of memory, our brains filling gaps or misremembering. But to those who believe in Montauk, these false memories are evidence of something else. Fractured timelines. Al Bielek's testimony added fuel to this idea. He claimed Montauk experiments regularly opened rifts into alternate versions of reality. He said he had lived through entire years in the future, including 2137, where the United States was devastated by coastal flooding, and 2749, where a world government ruled over floating cities. If his account were true, Montauk was not just a military research program. It was a fault line where different versions of history collided. Closer to home, visitors to Montauk Point report their own strange experiences. Some hikers describe sudden gaps in memory, as if hours had passed without explanation. Others tell of walking into a part of the park and emerging in a location they hadn't been heading toward, with no sense of how they got there. Amateur investigators have logged incidents of electronic devices failing, watches stopping, batteries drained, in areas near the radar tower. To skeptics, these are accidents, exaggerations, or the power of suggestion. To believers, they are symptoms of a reality still warped by experiments conducted decades ago. One striking story comes from a man who claimed to have been taken underground during his youth. He said he was returned safely, but not at the same moment he left. There was a 2-second discrepancy between him and the friends who swore he had vanished before their eyes. To most, it sounds like fantasy, but for those who already believe in Montauk, it is a glimpse of what happens when timelines refuse to align. The idea of fractured reality is not unique to Montauk. Physicists debate the possibility of multiple universes, each branching from decisions and quantum events. Science fiction has long imagined parallel worlds only a step away from our own. What makes Montauk different is the claim that such ideas were not theory, but practice, tested inside a base that was supposed to be abandoned. Skeptics argue the Mandela Effect is a mass memory error. Time slips are imagination, and Bielek's futuristic journeys are nothing but invention. But believers counter that too many people share the same mismatched memories. Too many anomalies cluster around Montauk for it all to be coincidence. If Montauk really fractured time, then its influence might not be confined to history books or abandoned bunkers. It could be stitched into our daily lives, into the maps we look at, the stories we tell, the very memories we carry. And if that is true, then the Montauk Project is not over. Its effects are still unfolding. The strangest part? Montauk never stayed in the shadows. Its accounts inspired one of Netflix's biggest shows, filled late-night airwaves, and continue to draw visitors to an abandoned radar tower on Long Island. Even without proof, the story refuses to die.